Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session on Java developers' journey to developer joy. My name is Syed Shaaf. I'm a technical evangelist at Red Hat. And historically, I have worked with Java for a long time. I don't think I want to count that, but let's just say I started from Java version 1.1. So I've had all the fun there with applets and whatnot. And of course, gone through that journey, been in consulting with Java, been in the open source, and been at Red Hat for a long time. So I work for Red Hat now for the last couple of years. And what I do mostly is work with things like Vertex, Quarkus, Node, and some of the other things. So today I'm going to talk about how you would create applications in Quarkus, what the developer experience looks like, how does Quarkus fit in, and how is it actually joyful? And that's the most important thing, since we kind of work in so many different ways today, with so many different deployment patterns, etc. It is important to understand how we could efficiently work and be more productive as we do this. So let's just get on. What's Java in the cloud? So today, if you're a Java developer, I hope you're writing microservices. I hope you're writing serverless, and I hope you're doing event-driven as well, because all of them are important, right? But when we look at monoliths, monoliths in the past have been big, use a lot of memories, RAM, for example, big machines sometimes, and we used to deploy everything in them, right? But now, since the whole distributed applications, distributed services, of course, we want something which is smaller, which is specific to that purpose, like for our specific microservice. And that would be in some sort of hundreds of megabytes of RAM, and expect the startup time to be in seconds, because you don't really want that to be slow when you have your Black Friday, as an example, going on. Same goes for serverless. Serverless is even more smaller units of your program code, and again, that needs to be very quick in startup. The application lifecycle is not days or not in months, but it's in minutes and seconds. It's supposed to do a specific thing and just goes and does it, right? So with all those different things that are out there, and to leverage, let's say, the public clouds, as well as what you run on your private infrastructure, like Kubernetes or OpenShift, how does a Java developer cope up with all of those things is kind of like challenging, right? So what I'm going to try to do, of course, is show you some of the cool features which Quarkus has, and I'm going to go through them, and I'm sure you must have seen some of the previous talks. If you haven't seen Stuart Douglas' talk around Quarkus as well, he does a lot of cool things with dev UI and testing and stuff, and you might find some similar patterns to this talk as well, but it's always good to kind of reiterate some of those things. Hopefully there's no reiteration though. So, okay, so let's move on. So that was short, as I promised. There are more slides, and hopefully we will get to them, but we will start with a demo first. So when you're using Quarkus, you can use Quarkus from CLI. You can install Quarkus CLI with your JBang dev, for example, using JBang. You don't even need to think about whether you have your OpenJDK installed. It's going to do that for you. And of course, it's going to install Quarkus CLI, and it will look something like Quarkus. And if I look at this, so I have the Quarkus CLI installed. I use it. I'm learning to use it still. There's a bunch of things. You can create your app. You can do a lot of things with it. So if I just say, let's go back here, Quarkus create, I am able to create, let's say, my application. So in my case, I tried this application a couple of times to ensure that it actually works. And sometimes it doesn't work at the end, but let's hope that it does. So I'll create a Quarkus application through Quarkus CLI. I could also go to, let's say, something like code.quarkus.io, which is also pretty cool. And over here, of course, you can also kind of say, hey, I want to create a new project. It should be Maven or Gradle or whatever you like. I want to, maybe I want to use REST-TZ or Reactive as an example. Maybe use JSONB. I want to use Hibernate, etc. So there's a bunch of extension that are out there, and let's say Panache as an example. So you will get Panache extension. So you would usually do that, and then of course you could download this as a zip file and go also use, also put it directly into GitHub, etc. But I'm not going to use code.quarkus.io. It is a cool tool. I've used it in previous demos as well, so I feel a bit brave. I'm going to try to do something else. I'm going to try to use the Quarkus CLI, which is new. Well, it's not relatively very new, but still quite new. And I'm going to use Quarkus CLI to create my application. I could, of course, also use it within my IDE. So if I had, in my Visual Studio Code, I could do that too. But over here, like if I do in my IntelliJ, I have the Quarkus plugin as well, and I can actually refer and create a new module from here as well. So let's just say I do Quarkus create, D3. Let's do that. So this is going to go on. You don't need to worry about all the different, setting up your artifacts, etc. It has already done that for you. So it is running. Let's just import that project. So module from existing sources, D3, and I need to keep the time in check here as well. So now I have the D3 project, the awesome D3 project, which has a greeting resource inside it as well. So I could go into my D3 directory and say Quarkus dev, and it's going to launch my Quarkus in development mode. Now that's cool because now I can start coding. So if I was to go onto my main project here, let's say greeting resource, this hello endpoint, for example, and it is, of course, my application is listening at localhost 8080. In my application, of course, let's take a quick look. I have the application properties, which is empty, which in development mode should stay as much empty as possible. I have an index.html, which is the default page. I have a greeting resource, which is just saying hello. And of course, I have some tests as well, as you can see there. And while I do that, of course, it has the Quarkus has continuous testing as well, which I will talk in a bit as well. Give me a minute there, and so here we are. So let's say localhost 8080, and here you would see the Quarkus, UI, the first page that's out there. But what it also has, some interesting stuff, is Dev UI, and then Dev UI is only for developer mode, of course. But here you will see all the different extensions that are loaded, some of the default ones that's out there. But again, you can see a lot of things that's out there. But here I have just created a simple application, which is just saying hello, right? So if I go here, oops, if I go here, I have the hello endpoint, which is saying hello REST-EZ, which we saw over here in our code. But then again, if I do something different, it's also going to tell me, hey, that's not the endpoint you have. The endpoints you have are hello, for example. So here I go again. I'm going to maybe change this to API, save it, go run again. And it's going to say, hey, there you are. The endpoint runs it. So here you can do live coding, right? So you can actually start to change things as you are doing them. Let's create a simple application. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some extensions. Again, I am going to add, let's say, Hibernate, Panache, JDBC, Postgres, SQL. I'm going to add these extensions, and that way, oops, I am in the wrong directory, of course. And this is going to go and add these extensions directly. What I can also do is Quarkus extension list, and it's going to list all the extensions that I have added here as an example. So now I have, Hibernate support as well. So what happens then, of course, is like, if I go back and try to see my endpoint here, it will, of course, make sure that there is dev services. There is going to be Postgres SQL that's also started, which it actually did once the extension was loaded. And of course, now I have a running backend Postgres SQL database that I can work against. So I'm going to quickly go here, create a Java class, to-do class. I'm going to say extends Panache entity, and a Panache entity is a basic extension for creating your own entities in Hibernate Panache. which makes it much more simpler to work with. You could even create your Panache repository, so you could implement a Panache repository and go through the repository pattern as well. But here, just for the sake, we're just going to do some basic stuff. So in my to-do, I have a title. I want to have a Boolean which says, hey, is my task completed? I want to have, let's say, an order of my tasks. And of course, I want to have a URL as well, just for the fun sake of it. But of course, I want to make sure that, you know, my title is not blank. So adding not blank annotation there. I want to add maybe that it is unique. So add the column. And here I can say, hey, it should be unique. But one thing you might have noticed, and of course, if you worked with SQL long, you would know that order is kind of like a keyword, right? So if I put that in there, it's gonna go massive fail, right? So I wanna make sure that this is called something else as an example, right? So nice, we can do that. Let's just create some nice assessor methods as well. So public static list should return maybe a to-do. And here I say, you know, find completed, right? And I want to search through that list, and I want to return all the items that are completed, and the value is true, right? So here we go. You can do the same. I'm gonna be the nice coder who just copies stuff around. Usually that fails sometimes as well, but hey, well, who cares? So false, and I have that. And then of course I could also do something like completed, that, and return, delete, completed, and it should be true. Oops. Right. So here I have a basic entity, but of course I also want to expose this through REST. I'm going to create a quick resource endpoint as well, or actually just do it like this. I'm feeling brave. I'm going to refactor this one and call it to the resource, makes our life easier, makes it quicker. So we do that. So everything should be changed. So in to-do resource, I have API. I want to make sure that it is returning application JSON. And I'll call this get all and return list. Now I'm basically creating a resource endpoint, which will return the list of to-do items that are in my database. Now, how do I do that? I can do to-do dot, you know, list, and I could do something like sort dot, or just let's say to-do list and return that. So list. All, there you go. So I'm just going to return everything there. Now, if you go back here, go to my API endpoint, wait, so something's missing. JSON application media. So usually that happens, right? So now I just go in, and I think the extension, since I don't remember all the extension names, I'm just going to take some help here and say, hey, Quarkus extension add JSON B. And that means that now my extension will be loaded into Quarkus live, and I'll be able to see my application. Wait, that does not look good. Hang on. Demos and demos. What did I miss? I should have everything. Let's just make a quick start. And we're restarting. And here you see that my Postgres container comes up. I should have all the extensions. Yes, I have all the extensions loaded. And we're going to hit it again. Oh, sometimes things can happen. So anyways, now I have the API. I have raw data, no data in there. Now, what do? I want some data. Let's just take some properties. Let's just take some data here. Create an import.sql in my D3 project. New file, import.sql, paste it out here, save, and ta-da, you have all the items listed. If I wanted to, let's say, do a bit more, I also want to see some SQL. So I go back into my application props, share that as well. So I want to see what the SQL is being executed. Here you see that as soon as I change my application properties, it also does that. So as you can see, it's doing everything live. I can do stuff and I can change that. So what if happens if I miss something by accident? It's also going to tell me that. It's going to tell me on a reverse stack, hey, you have an error in your to-do application. So go on line 15 and fix that error as an example. Of course, errors can be more complicated too, but it has the reverse stack for you to take a look at. So how about if I added something like Swagger now as well? And now I should be able to get that extension loaded as well. If I go here, I will see that Quarkus has started again. It has loaded the extension, so it automatically knows that I have added an extension, and it does everything in accordance to that. So I hit my API again. Perfect. I go here. I go into my dev UI. So dev services, taking care of all of the environment that you have. And then, of course, dev UI being on the top here. So here I added Hibernate Panache. You can see I have an entity. It lists that entity. It lists the persistent units. It shows me the scripts that it's going to run. So very useful as well. Also, it shows me my Swagger UI, so I can actually see what's going on. Can I try it out? Yes, I can try it out. And here I get the response as well. So some of the things there. And of course, then we also have continuous testing. So you can continue you're running your tests like I just did by pressing R over here. It runs the tests, it's checking, and it keeps on going. If you need to see a more comprehensive demo, you should be able to see that with Stuart's session as well. So I'm not going to go deep into that, but important to show you some of those features as well. So here I'm going to cheat a bit now because my application looks extremely rudimentary. So what I'll do is I'm going to just copy some of the UI front end from my code, which is written in JavaScript. So you can imagine I'm not so great with JavaScript, and I'm just gonna paste it out here. And as I do that, of course, it's gonna load that in real time as well. So now I go back to my app. Perfect. Things are still working. And I go into do.html. And here I see the different applications that are out there. Of course, I am only listing these right now. So in respect to time, of course, I want to show you more, but I can see I'm kind of lagging a bit in here. But what I'll do is that I will just make a quick more cheat here, and I will copy my to-do resource to just to get all the functions and methods in there. Hopefully I didn't break anything. Oh, yep. So that should work. And what I do want to show you now is, let's say, how do I deploy this application on something like OpenShift? So let's just do that. I'm going to go on developer.redhat.com, developer sandbox, and well, where did that go? Here it is already. Okay. So here I've cheated a bit. I've already deployed a Postgres database. This is the OpenShift console. I can see that my database is running here. There's some application already running there. And now I'm going to try to push this. But to push this, I will, of course, have to add the extension, which is the OpenShift extension. So I'm going to add this OpenShift extension, and what will it do is it will enable Quarkus to create all the manifest, everything to deploy my application onto something like Kubernetes, onto something like OpenShift as a package, as having all the details that I need to do. So I have some bunch of configuration that I have kind of done for that already, and let me show you that in a bit. So what I'm doing is that I am saying, hey, I have a database, because previously the dev service database was already, kind of has its own configuration and everything, and I was using it local, but now for production, I want to use this, right? Or for current, deployment as an example. I'm also saying that, hey, when you deploy my application, make sure that you also expose a route so that my application is now accessible from online as well. And then, of course, I'm dropping in creating. And then again, I'm also trying some of the other things that I want to do is I want to try to access this application through my IDE as well. To do that now, I'm just going to do is deploy this application, clean compile. So just compile this quickly. And what I'll do is that I'm going to deploy this application very quickly onto Kubernetes. Here, I'm just saying, hey, deploy this application onto Kubernetes, and Quarkus is going to build this package. It's going to create the jar. I'm not using native in this case. It's going to create an image. It's going to push that image into OpenShift. So if I go on OpenShift right now, it's going to be creating this in the backend. If I go to my administrator panel here, look at some of the pods, I will see that, hey, there's a D3 build that is going on. So in the back, it's actually creating a build, pushing this directly project onto OpenShift, where I can actually start seeing it when it's done. So it's creating that image stream, it's packaging it, and then it's, of course, going to run this through and deploy it onto OpenShift as an example. So what have we done so far? We've created a simple to-do application. We kind of added some UI to it with some JavaScript code in the front end. And of course, we kind of put that whole thing together, added extensions. While we add extensions, it kind of also goes up quite nicely. And of course, the Quarkus live code, live reload experience understands that I'm adding extensions, understands that those extensions need specific parameters, and it also takes care, for example, of those parameters as well. So here you will see that my application will start to come up, and the D3 is here, and let's just wait for it to run. Here you go. It's running. Take a look at the logs. You can see that Quarkus has loaded. Let me see. Is it actually true? Yep. And then, of course, if I go on to to-do.html, it will load my to-do front end exactly the way I did. But I can also do something like mvn, let's see, Quarkus remote, right? Oops, remote. So now what I'm trying to do, and I hope I've done this correctly, is I'm trying to connect to my remote container, which I did tell when I was deploying this application that I also want to be able to remotely connect to this application. And here you can see that it is directly connected to my remote application. And any changes that I do here would be automatically directly reflected into, let's say, onto the Quarkus app. So if I press Control Save here and try to go to my app, or let's just say try to go to my API, I would have a problem that it doesn't exist, right? Because now it listens to API 2. So by this, I can also remotely in environments do this. And then of course, when I'm done, I can just quickly go back and set this property to false. And of course, my application can be deployed in production in that fashion. So here's a short demo, of course, that I did. And let me just go back to my presentation, and we can do a quick recap of what I have done so far. So basically what I did was, of course, I created the application. I deployed it onto OpenShift. I created it with the live coding. We saw how Dev UI works, like all the different features. Every time I load extension, every time I create an error, if I have tests failing, it knows exactly. I can keep on fixing those tests, etc. And of course, I can do all live code at all times. So it's kind of helping us how we develop in a cloud environment. And then, of course, when we deploy to it, OpenShift understands whether Quarkus understands whether you deploy an OpenShift onto OpenShift as an application, or you deploy a function as an example on top of it as well. So it understands what extensions you're needing, how it needs to optimize that. And of course, there's a lot of technical talks on that too, which you can do. So Quarkus is fast. If you didn't notice, and I should have made you notice though, that application starts really, really fast. It has a really small footprint in megabyte. So if we go back to our application, in respect to time, we can't do that. But if we would look the application, the application size of a simple application is relatively small. If you go native, you all probably also have heard this other places, is that, in native would have a much lesser footprint, for example, in your memory. But with Quarkus JVM mode, it will still be smaller than any traditional stack as well. And I think that's the important thing. The pre-processing, all of the different AOT stuff that Quarkus does together, even using GraalVM in native mode, helps a lot in terms of the sizing. So if you were thinking about, hey, Java is big and I cannot deploy it in the cloud, well, guess what? You can do that with Quarkus. The other thing is it's fast. So you can, you can have your Quarkus native application boot up like a REST endpoint, boot up in 0.016. That's even less than a second, right? So it's in milliseconds. You can do the same with Quarkus JVM. And of course, traditional apps take a lot more time. Even with databases, Quarkus is much more faster. And of course, that is because how Quarkus is, like I said, all the pre-processing, etc. it does at build time, as well as the reactive core. So the reactive core gives you the possibility to do both the things. What we of course looked in today's demo is we looked at how you can do things, how Quarkus understands the developer needs while you're live coding. It understands how you're doing things. If you make errors, it shows you those reverse stacks even on your let's say a UI. The dev services take care of, let's say you can have Postgres in the backend, Mongo, whatever databases, or OIDC, like Stuart also showed in his talk today. Dev services take care of you when you are developing, that you don't have to think about, hey, I need to plug in this, I need to start this container XYZ. It takes care of everything. And of course, the developer UI gives you the full experience of how you can go through what your application is doing and what your configurations are. Continuous testing, of course, another awesome thing which you can do is keep on writing tests for it. And of course, we also have seen remote dev in this case as well, where you can deploy to Kubernetes directly like OpenShift, like I did with Developer Sandbox, and actually see your application there as well. Like I said, Quarkus has a reactive core, which means that you can, in case of Quarkus and only Quarkus, you don't have to care about the underlying reactive core. You can still use REST easy reactive and write imperative code, and you can write reactive code at the same time as well. So you don't need to think about these things differently. For learning experience is awesome. For people working in in the same team, having different mindsets and doing it is also awesome. So you can kind of leverage that regardless, since it has a reactive core, and you can write imperative code on top of it as well. It has a lot of extensions like we saw on code.quarkus.io. Oops. I think that's an indication. Okay, so there's a lot of extensions we saw on code.quarkus.io. Recently, we also had the Microsoft SQL Server JDBC support added to Quarkus reactive as well, so you can even do that. So there's a bunch of stuff. Go and take a look at code.quarkus.io. I'm going to leave you with a couple of things. Developer Sandbox, which I showed you, is free for use. You can sign up, you get 14-day access onto an OpenShift environment, and you can run your all your code there and test it out and see, and you can do the same with this application that I did, which is placed on this demo app link here. There's also a bunch of cool other things like Quarkus Insights. It's a YouTube channel or Twitch. Wherever you go, you can actually see what's going on in Quarkus. You know, there are people talking about, engineering folks and other folks involved with it, talking about what's going on in there. There's a nice book called Quarkus for Spring Developers. So if you're a Spring developer, you might want to read this ebook. It also resides on developers.redhat.com. And of course, there's a bunch of other things that I've put in here. So a bit of fast track here. And I say thank you now. And I would just see if you have questions, and I can take questions and give some answers to them as well. So what other K8 distribution can you use with Quarkus? Any gotchas when not using Quarkus with OCP? Sure, you can use Kubernetes. You can build your containers with Jib if you wanted to. So that's possible. You can easily do that. You use the Kubernetes extension, and then it's specifically doing all the Kubernetes stuff. So you can do that. Not a problem. Use the Kubernetes extension. And then, of course, there's container extensions as well, building containers if you wanted to. Also, how can someone make their own Java library Quarkus compatible? Well, when you create your Quarkus application, if you're using something, and this is a very good question because a lot of people would have that, like I was doing something like OpenCV development, and I had a problem, and I asked somebody, about that, and they ended up putting an extension themselves. So it's not that hard. It's you will see a Quarkiverse, which is also on GitHub, where you'll see a bunch of extensions written by others and contributed as well. And you can you can easily write extensions. There's a whole extensions guide on Quarkus.io as well. It's not extremely difficult. Of course, if you have an application that does a lot of reflection, maybe not reflection, but dynamic proxying, etc., then of course you would need to see what's the best option for you. But it's not impossible, and it's not extremely hard as well. Take a look at the Quarkus.io guides, and that should work for you. So I think those were the questions. I think I'm gonna say thank you for your time, and I will be in the Red Hat booth in case anybody has any questions and want to take some discussions. Thanks.